The line at the hospital billing window had been moving slowly all morning, which was not unusual. Billing windows at hospitals move slowly the way certain things that carry weight move slowly, not from indifference, but from the accumulated mass of what they're being asked to process. Renee Colbert had been at this window for 15 years. She knew the difference between a slow morning and a heavy one, and this one, by 10:00 on a Tuesday in February, was already heavy. She had processed 4 bills before the woman got to the window. A man in his 70s disputing a charge from October. A family trying to understand an explanation of benefits that did not explain anything. A teenager paying with a debit card that declined 3 times before going through on the 4th. After which he stood at the counter for an extra moment, doing the careful arithmetic of someone recalculating the rest of the month. The woman, when she reached the window, was young, late 20s, maybe 30. She had a little girl with her, 5 or 6 years old. Sitting in one of the plastic chairs against the wall with a stuffed rabbit in her lap and a look of patient endurance that small children develop when they have spent a lot of time in waiting rooms. The woman's name was Daria Simms, and she was there about a bill from November from an emergency room visit that had lasted 4 hours and produced an itemized statement she had been looking at for 3 months without finding a way into it. Renee pulled up the account. The balance was $4,012 after insurance. The insurance had not covered as much as anyone had expected. Daria said, "Can I set up a payment plan?" Renee said, "Yes. Absolutely. The minimum monthly is $50. Daria said, "How long would that take?" Renee did the math out loud, gently, and the number of months it produced was large enough that Daria looked down at the counter between them for a moment and did not say anything. Renee had seen this moment many times. It was the moment when the abstract fact of debt met the concrete fact of time, and the two things together produced a specific kind of silence that was different from every other kind. She was about to explain the hardship assistance program. She explained it many times a day. More times than almost anything else she said in a professional capacity. When the man behind Daria in line spoke, he said, "Excuse me, I'm sorry to interrupt. Can you put that bill on my card?" Daria turned around. Renee looked past her. The man was in his early 60s, gray at the temples, wearing a dark wool jacket and carrying a coffee cup from the hospital's ground floor cafe. He was not agitated. He was not performing anything. He said it the way you say something you have already thought through, without the hesitation of a new idea, without the slight self-consciousness of someone doing something unusual. He said it the way you might ask someone to hold a door. Daria said, "I'm sorry?" He said, "Your bill. I'd like to pay it, if that's acceptable." Daria stared at him. She said, "You don't know me." He said, "No." She said, "You don't know why I was in the emergency room." He said, "You don't have to tell me." She looked at the little girl in the chair. Then, back at him. She said, "Why would you do this?" He said, "Someone did it for me once, a long time ago. I try to do it when I can." He paused. "My name is Thomas Marsh. I'm not anyone in particular. I just have the card and you have the bill, and it seems like the straightforward thing." He handed the card to Renee through the window. She took it. And then she looked at his face. The name had not registered. But the face, the particular set of the eyes, the way he held his chin slightly down when he was waiting for something, hit her in the way that certain things hit you not gradually but all at once, like a word you have been trying to remember surfacing fully formed. Her hands did not stop moving. She ran the card the way she had run 10,000 cards before it. The transaction processed. She printed the receipt. She slid it through the window with a hand that was steady because 15 years of this work had given her a steadiness that was, by now, mostly structural. She said, "Miss Marsh, can I ask you to wait for just a moment?" He looked at her with the calm attention of someone who does not have anywhere more important to be. He said, "Of course." Daria was still standing at the counter. She was holding her copy of the paid receipt, and looking at it the way you look at something when you cannot yet organize the feeling it produces. She said, "I don't know how to thank you." Thomas said, "You don't have to." He smiled, briefly. "Tell your daughter that rabbit looks like a good one." Daria looked at the little girl, who was watching all of them with the alert, cataloging attention of a child who understands that something out of the ordinary is happening even if she cannot name it. Daria nodded once, pressed the receipt to her chest, and walked toward the elevator with her daughter's hand in hers. Thomas turned back to the window and waited. Renee said, "I need to tell you something." He said, "All right." She said, 20 years ago, it was March 2005, I was standing at a billing window very much like this one. This hospital, in fact, different location in the building before the renovation. My mother had come in by ambulance 2 days before. Emergency surgery. She had no insurance, and the bill was, I don't remember the exact number. I have tried to remember it many times, and it always comes out different, but it was close to $6,000. I was 19. I had 2 jobs. I had $420 in my checking account. Thomas was listening with his hands around his coffee cup and his full attention on her face. She said, "There was a man in line behind me. I don't remember noticing him particularly until the clerk told me the total and I started to cry. I was trying not to, but I couldn't stop. And the man stepped forward and handed his card to the clerk and said, and I remember the exact words, I have always remembered them. He said, 'Use this.' The whole thing. And then he stepped back and looked at the window behind me and waited for his own transaction as if nothing had happened. She looked at Thomas. She said, 'I tried to thank him.' He shook his head. He said something like, 'It's what you do.' I asked him his name. I was going to pay him back. He said, 'You'll find a better use for it.' And then when I turned back around, he was already gone. I had been at the clerk for 30 seconds, maybe less. A pause. She said, 'I have thought about that man's face every day for 20 years. Every single day I sit at this window. I thought about him every time I processed a bill for someone who was struggling. I thought, somewhere this man exists, and he did that, and I never got to tell him what it meant.' She stopped. Thomas said, very quietly, 'It was me.' She said, 'I know.' He said nothing for a moment. He said, 'I don't remember. I want to be honest with you. I have done this. I've been doing this for a long time, and I don't keep track of the individual instances. I'm sorry.' 'That must seem,' she said. 'It seems exactly right. I know it sounds strange, but it seems exactly right that you don't remember. The reason it changed my life is because you did it as if it were the obvious thing, as if anyone would have. That's why I couldn't stop thinking about you.' Thomas looked at her for a long moment. Then he set his coffee cup on the narrow ledge of the billing window and he said, 'Can I tell you where this started?' She said, 'Please.' His name was Thomas Marsh, and he was 63 years old, and he had spent 31 years teaching 9th grade English at Jefferson High School in Columbus, Ohio, which was the kind of school that received students from neighborhoods where the margin for error was very thin and where he had understood early on that teaching literature was also, always, a conversation about what people owe each other. He had retired 4 years ago and had not entirely figured out what to do with himself since, which was a problem he addressed primarily by staying in motion. His wife's name had been Margaret. She had died 8 years ago of a cancer that had given them enough warning to say everything that needed saying, which was both a mercy and its own particular kind of grief. Margaret had been a woman of strong opinions and precise language, and the specific practicality of someone who had grown up without enough and had never entirely trusted abundance. She had been the one who started it. In 1987, before Thomas had his first teaching job, before they had any margin at all, Margaret had gone to the hospital with appendicitis that had progressed further than it should have because she had been ignoring it for a week and a half because she was worried about what it would cost. The surgery was successful. The bill was substantial. They had no insurance. Thomas was substitute teaching. Margaret was between jobs. and the bill was the kind that reorders the future you had been imagining. A man they did not know had paid it. They found out when they called the billing office to make a payment arrangement. The clerk told them it had been taken care of. She couldn't tell them by whom. They never found out. Margaret had stood in their apartment kitchen holding the phone after she hung up, and she had said to Thomas, who was watching her face to understand what had happened, "Someone paid it. A stranger. We don't know who." And she had been quiet for a long time. Then she had said, "We have to find them so we can pay them back." They never found them. They tried, and they couldn't. After 3 years of trying, Margaret had said, "I don't think we're supposed to find them. I think we're supposed to pay someone else." She had said it simply, the way she said most things. When we have it, when someone needs it, we just pay it. They had done it for the first time in 1992 at a pharmacy counter, a young man who was $17 short on a prescription. It had taken them 10 years after that to have the money to do it at a hospital. Once they did it at a hospital, they never stopped. Margaret had died in 2017. In her nightstand, Thomas found a small notebook she had kept. Dates, places, amounts. Not names. She had never asked for names, just the date, the place, and the dollar amount. 53 entries over 25 years. Thomas had kept going. He said, "I carry the notebook. I've added to it." He reached into his jacket and removed a small green notebook, worn at the corners. He held it up so Renee could see it, but did not open it. 81 now, including this morning. Renee looked at the notebook. She said, "Do you know anything about the person who paid your wife's bill in 1987? He said nothing. We know they were at that hospital on a Tuesday. We know the amount. We know the billing clerk described them as a quiet older woman who paid in cash and did not leave a name." He paused. "Whoever she was, she has been with us for 36 years. Renee said, "Did your wife keep any record of that original bill? From 1987? He said Margaret kept everything. He looked at her. "Why?" She said, "I'm going to tell you something, and I need you to understand that this isn't something I can prove. I can only tell you what I know." He waited. She said, "My mother's name was Renee Colbert. She worked at Columbus Memorial for 22 years before she retired. She was a billing clerk from 1981 to 2003. She told me once, I was maybe 12, 13. She told me about a woman who came in to pay a bill in cash and refused to leave a name. My mother described her as the quietest act of kindness she'd ever seen up close. She said the woman had white hair and paid the whole thing without looking at the patient's chart, without asking what it was for. She just said, 'Whatever it is, here's the cash, and please tell them someone was glad to help.' Thomas was very still. She said, 'My mother said she thought about that woman for years. She told that story to me more than once. And when I was 19 and standing at a billing window and a man paid my mother's bill the same way, quietly, no name, no waiting for thanks, I thought, my mother would say this is the same thing. She would say it's traveling.'" Thomas did not speak for a long moment. The billing office around them continued its ordinary operations. A printer ran. Someone called a name from across the waiting area. The small, constant sounds of a place where people come with numbers they cannot reconcile. He said, "She kept a record." He opened the notebook to the first page. There was a photocopy tape there, old paper, the fold lines dark from years of being opened and closed. He held it up to the window. It was a hospital billing receipt, the kind produced in carbon triplicate dated September 14, 1987. At the bottom was a total. Renee looked at the number. She did not say anything for a moment. Then she said, "My mother always said the woman paid in cash." She said the amount was almost exactly what the bill was, like she'd known ahead of time. My mother thought that was strange. She thought about it for years. He said, "Margaret always carried a little more than she thought she'd need. She said you never knew what the total would be. Renee pressed her fingers flat on the counter. She said, I have been sitting at this window for 15 years. I have thought about the man who paid my mother's bill every single day I've been here. Every time someone came to this window and couldn't pay, I thought about him. I thought about what it must be like to be the kind of person who just does that. She stopped. She said, and the whole time, without knowing it, I was already in it. My mother's story was the beginning of yours. Your name is in a chain that started with a woman with white hair in 1987. And I have been sitting in the middle of it for 15 years without knowing. Thomas Marsh looked at her. He said, What is your mother's name? She said, Lorraine. She's 74. She's well. She still talks about that woman sometimes. He said, would she want to know? Renee thought about her mother, who was the kind of woman who kept things because she believed certain things deserved to be kept, who had told the story of the quiet woman with white hair at least a dozen times over the course of Renee's life, always in a tone that was half memory and half wonder. Who would be sitting right now, Renee knew. At the kitchen table with her second cup of coffee and her crossword. She said, yes, she would want to know. Thomas nodded. He closed the notebook. He picked up his coffee cup. He said, then I'll let you call her. He said it the way he said most things, simply, without ceremony, as if it were the obvious next step. He said goodbye to Renee, and he walked back through the billing area the way he had come in. Past the rows of plastic chairs, through the doors that open automatically and close the same way, out into the February light. Renee watched him go. Then she picked up her phone and called her mother, and when Lorraine answered on the third ring with the slightly startled quality of someone who had been deep in a crossword clue, Renee said, Mama, I need to tell you something. You know the man who paid our bill? The one from 2005 that I always talk about? Her mother said, Of course. She said, He just walked up to my window. There was a pause. Her mother said, What? Renee said, He's been doing it for 30 years, since before he paid ours. And Mama, the reason he started, I think it goes back to you. The phone was quiet for a long time. Then Renee Colbert said, very softly, the way you say something when you are 50 years into believing that kindness returns, but have not expected to see the proof of it at 10:00 on a Tuesday morning in February, tell me everything. Renee sat at her billing window, in the chair where she had sat for 15 years, and she told her. The line behind the window moved slowly, the way it always did. The printer ran. The waiting room filled and emptied and filled again. Someone came to the window with a number they could not reconcile, and Renee helped them the way she always had, thoroughly, patiently, without hurry. At the end of her shift, she opened the drawer where she kept her personal items, and she took out a small notebook she had bought at the pharmacy on her lunch break. She wrote today's date on the first page. She wrote the amount Thomas had paid for Daria. She wrote the location, hospital billing window, 2nd floor. She did not write any names. She put the notebook in her bag, and she went home. She called Thomas Marsh the following week because she had thought for a long time about whether to, and had decided that some things want to be said out loud. She told him what she had started. He said, good, nothing else. Just that one word with the quiet weight of someone who has been waiting, without knowing it, for the chain to find the next link. Sometimes the most important transaction at a hospital billing window is not the one on the screen. Sometimes it is the one no one remembers making, traveling 36 years through white hair and carbon paper and a green notebook and a woman sitting at the same window every day, until it arrives exactly where it was always going.